Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back. In today's video, we are going to be creating a couple of Christmas cards, and I wanted to create two cards that kind of looked like a front door that had a bunch of letters to Santa. I just thought it was a really cute idea, and I really wanted to use our mail delivery and our mini mail dynamics. These are some of my favorite dies, and I love to incorporate them whenever I can into my crafting. I love the idea of letters to Santa, and I thought it would translate really well onto a card design, so I really wanted to try it out with this die here. So this is the cover-up die called Striped Sentiment Strip Cover-Up. And I got a little creative in my thinking and decided that we could turn this into a door. I love the larger space in this die, and I figured that would be a perfect spot for the mail slot. So I actually created two cards. I used one with it at the top of the card, and then this one here that we're going to create now, I positioned it at the bottom. So you can see there when I showed that first card, that's kind of the idea of what we're going to create here, but we're going to change up the look of this one just a bit. So I'm keeping the colors kind of consistent throughout the two card designs. For the first one, I used electric red for the door and then used a Limelight card base. And for this one here, I'm going to use the electric red as the card base, and I'm going to use Summer Splash cardstock to create the door. I did add a little bit of peacock feathers distressing to the sides of the top layer of the door piece, just to add a little bit of shading to that. And now I'm using some liquid adhesive to apply glue to the back of this top layer here so that we can add it to our cardstock piece that is cut slightly smaller. This is just going to back this and create the look of the blue being both on the top layer as well as underneath on the bottom layer. With the mail delivery die, you can create an interactive card by cutting the window opening with this die here so that your mail can actually go into the inside of the card. But I'm only going to use the frame piece as well as the mail word. Since I don't actually want it to go to the inside, I'm actually going to adhere the letter right up underneath the mailbox opening. So for this one here, I used brushed silver cardstock to cut out all of the pieces. For the first one, I used the silver sparkle for a different look. And now I'm just going to use some liquid glue, and I'm going to adhere the word mail onto the mail slot piece of this mailbox. I'm also going to use the little tab piece and adhere that onto the inside underneath of the flap, and that is going to complete our little mailbox piece. I find liquid glue is the quickest and easiest way to adhere these letters, but you just want to be careful anytime you're working on this type of cardstock where it has kind of that shiny finish, because if you do get any of the glue outside of the letter areas, it is going to kind of smudge on the cardstock. So you just want to be careful of that when you're adhering everything. So now I'm just adding this little final piece here, and then I'm going to set this aside to dry and we can work on the rest of the card. Okay, so now we're going to use the mini mail dynamics to create our little letters to Santa. So I'm going to be using the rectangle piece as well as the little postage stamp. There is a ton of dies in this set. It's one of my favorites, but I just need those two for this card today. And I'm also going to be using the Candyland pattern paper pack. I'm going to be using the multicolor stripe as well as the red and white stripe. And I used the rectangle piece to cut out the two pattern papers. I then cut out two pieces of white cardstock slightly smaller than the pattern paper pieces so I could layer this on top. And I also cut out two postage stamps with white cardstock. So the first thing I'm doing is just adhering the little white pieces over top of the pattern paper. I was kind of trying to go for the look of an envelope that has like the stripe detail around the outside edge, so I thought this ended up really cute. And then for the postage stamps, I'm just going to use a Copic marker, and I'm going to color in both of those really quickly with one color. So I'm using aqua for one and green for the other, and just very quickly adding that color over top. And then I'm going to use the same liquid glue I used earlier to add these to the front of our envelopes. These are so cute when they're put together, and they're so easily customizable depending on what occasion you're creating for your card design. So they're a lot of fun to play around with and create different designs. Now for my card, I wanted them to be letters to Santa, so I'm going to be stamping Santa onto them. For the first card, I put the Santa sentiment onto one of them, and I also stamped ho 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 onto another. For this one, I decided just to use the Santa stamp and just put that on both of the envelopes. So to do that, I just picked out a sentiment stamp from the Secret Santa stamp set that has the word Santa in it. And I'm just going to be using that portion of the stamp to stamp out the Santa word on the front of the envelope. So you can just kind of look through your stash and find anything that would work to put onto the front here. I'm going to stamp this right in the center there, and I'm going to do the same on the other. And then we have our little envelopes ready to go, and we can start to put the card together. So for the first card, we had the mailbox positioned towards the top, whereas this one we're going to put it near the bottom. So when I add my little snow hills here, they're going to be a little bit lower down, and we're not really going to have any room to put any of the Santa letters into the snow. So we're going to change up the design of this one. So I used the Stitch Snowdrift Die-namics and cut out 2 pieces of white cardstock that would fit across the bottom here. And I'm just adding them on with some regular adhesive, and then I'm trimming off the excess with my scissors. Now for this one, we have a lot of space at the top, so that's where we're going to do a little bit of added decoration. I'm adding the panel to my electric red card base, which is an A2 size card that measures 5.5 by 4.25 inches. And then to decorate the top of this one, we're going to create a holiday wreath, and we're going to use a single die from the Fab Foliage Die-namics die set. This is a really great die to create a wreath because it kind of has a little bit of a curve to it. So if you combine a bunch of these together, you can kind of create a perfect circle. So that's what we're going to do with a bunch of these that I've die cut from Limelight cardstock. So to layer all of these together, I usually like to use a liquid glue. I find it's easiest to kind of add them all together, but I do like to work on a scratch piece of paper since the glue kind of tends to get all over and I don't want it to get on the front of my card. So what I'm going to do is just kind of flip each one upside down and add some glue to all of the different leaf parts, and then I'm going to layer it onto the one below it. And I'm just going to continue this process until I have kind of a perfect circle arranged. Now I usually tend to get this stuck to the scratch piece of paper that I'm adding it to, but if you use your tweezers, you can quickly pull that off of there. And then when I have the finished wreath completed, I'm going to add the base of it to the card, and then we can continue to add more of these leaves on top. Now I kept my wreath all one color, but if you wanted to add even more interest to it, you could die cut these leaves from different colors of green cardstock, and that would add a little bit more contrast. Or you could cut them all from white and color them in with your markers or pencil crayons, whatever works for you to create the different green colors that you want to incorporate into your wreath. And like I mentioned earlier, I did get it stuck to the scratch paper, so I just used my tweezers and very carefully pulled that off, and now I'm adding it to my card front. So now I have this really fun wreath, the base layer, and we can add more on top to really fill this up. So once I have it on there and positioned where I want it, I'm going to use the same process and just kind of add each of these pieces all the way around once again. So when I'm finished, this has ended up being 2 layers worth of the leaves, and it just helped to fill in some of that empty space that you can kind of see right now before we have the second layer added. I love being able to create custom cards like this where we've created a door from a cover-up die that is not meant to be a door. We've taken some fab foliage and we've created a wreath from that. And then we've added that little mailbox slot with the little letters to create a fun little winter scene. I also wanted to add a bow to my holiday wreath, so I'd use the die from the Filled with Joy die set, and I'm going to cut out the little bow portion and trim off the extra pieces. I don't want the little piece hanging down the top and bottom. And then I'm just going to use some liquid glue and I'm going to adhere this to the bottom of the wreath. And my plan for this one is to take the second letter and tuck it inside of the wreath so it kind of looks like it was set into the wreath since the mailbox was full and overflowing with mail. Since I didn't have enough room to add this one down in the snow, I thought this would be a cute alternative. So I'm just going to kind of position that in there. I did trim off a little bit of that letter so I could tuck it in nicely and get it right in the middle there. And then I kind of folded up the edges just to give it a little bit of dimension. I'm going to adhere the second letter into the mailbox slot so it's kind of falling out. And then to finish off this design, I'm going to use some sparkly red enamel dots, and I'm going to add one to the center of the bow. And then I'm also going to add a bunch of them around the wreath just to kind of look like holly berries on our finished wreath design. I love adding all of the little finishing details and really think it adds to the overall look of the card. Okay, so once I have that done, we are finished our 2 cards, and we have these adorable little cards that have letters to Santa included. Now these could also work as some really fun home decor. You could create these and then frame them and actually display them in your home. I love the look of them and just think they're really unique and fun, and I love that we used a bunch of different products and got creative with how we used them and kind of got new uses out of them from what they were intended. All of the supplies I've used on today's cards are in the video description below, so make sure to check that out if you're interested in any of these products. As always, I appreciate you joining me for today's video, and I thank you so much for joining me. I will see you in another video soon. Thanks so much for watching.